You'd call the cops on your own family? My father screamed, his face turning purple. I just looked at him, the man who disowned me, and thought to myself, I'm calling the cops on the 3 strangers who just broke into my house. My name is Martha. I'm 38, and the story I'm about to tell you didn't end with a quiet resolution over coffee. It ended with the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser painting my shattered living room. You'd call the cops on your own family? My father, Frank, spat at me, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. I just looked at the wreckage, my life's work, my sanctuary, and the single, hateful word scrawled in my sister's lipstick on my wall. Ungrateful. The irony was so thick, it felt hard to breathe. I turned to the officer, whose gaze drifted from the broken heirlooms to my parents' defiant faces. This wasn't just a break-in. It was the violent, messy climax of a family tragedy decades in the making. It was the moment the quiet girl finally decided that justice was more important than blood. This is one of those deeply personal family revenge stories, but this one is mine, and it starts not with hatred, but with a lifetime of misplaced love. The officer gently asked if I was okay. Was I? I wasn't sure, but I knew I wasn't alone in facing this kind of impossible choice. If you have ever had to draw a line in the sand with the very people who were supposed to cherish you most, just hit that like button so I know you're here with me. It was more than just my home they shattered. It was a lifetime of dutiful silence. To understand how we ended up with shattered heirlooms and flashing police lights, you have to rewind. Go back past the anger and the betrayal to the humid, sweet tea-scented afternoons of our childhood in Savannah, Georgia. From the outside, we were the perfect Southern family, living in a respectable home just a few miles from the historic district's moss-draped oaks. My parents, Frank and Dolores, presented a flawless image to the world. And at the center of that image was my younger sister, Brenda. She was born to be a Southern belle, charming, artistic, with a radiant smile that could captivate any room. She was the golden child, the one whose watercolors were framed, whose dance recitals were family events, and whose future was considered a community investment. I, on the other hand, was the practical one, the quiet, studious daughter who got good grades, worked a part-time job since I was 16, and never caused any trouble. My achievements were not celebrated, they were simply expected. Oh, Martha can handle it. My mother would say, she's always been so independent. What she meant was that I'd learned to rely on myself because no one else was going to step up for me. That dynamic set the stage for everything that followed. It's a strange, lonely feeling to be the reliable one. Let me know in the comments, were you the designated fixer in your family, the one who always had to be strong? Or were you the star, the one everyone pinned their hopes on? I really want to see the balance. This wasn't just sibling rivalry, it was the foundation upon which my family would eventually build their impossible demands. That foundation of favoritism carried right into our adult lives. While I was putting myself through Georgia State, working 2 jobs to graduate with a business degree and a mountain of manageable debt, Brenda was attending the Savannah College of Art and Design, fully funded by Frank and Dolores. After graduation, I landed a junior analyst position in Atlanta. I lived with 3 roommates, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and meticulously tracked every penny, slowly building my savings. My goal was simple: financial independence. Brenda's goal was fame. She launched her own lifestyle brand, a chic boutique in a wildly expensive part of Savannah's historic downtown. My parents, blinded by her charisma, cashed out a portion of their retirement to fund her dream. The breaking point arrived 6 years ago via a frantic, tearful phone call. The boutique was failing. She'd mismanaged inventory, overspent on marketing, and couldn't make the rent, which was thousands of dollars a month. "Martha, I'm going to lose everything," she sobbed. "Dad and Mom are tapped out. The bank needs $50,000 by Friday, or they'll foreclose. You have savings, don't you? You've always been so good with money." $50,000. It was almost everything I had painstakingly saved. It was my emergency fund, my future, my proof that discipline mattered. I hesitated, the request so audacious it stole my breath. The silence on the line stretched for only a second before her tears of desperation turned to ice. My hesitation was my answer. and it was the trigger for the storm that was about to break over my head. An hour after Brenda hung up on me, my mother called, and the emotional assault began. Dolores's voice was thick with manufactured tears. "How can you be so selfish, Martha? Your sister's dream is dying." I tried to explain, to talk about repayment plans or business strategy, but she cut me off. "So, your money is more important than your sister? More important than this family?" An hour after that, my father called. Frank's tone wasn't emotional. It was cold, heavy, and final. "We raised you better than this," he said, his disappointment a palpable weight through the phone. "In this family, we put family before money." The hypocrisy was staggering, considering they had never applied that logic to my education or my struggles, but I knew arguing was pointless. I stood my ground, my voice trembling as I said I could not throw away my entire life savings, and that's when he delivered the ultimatum that would slice my life in two. "All right, Martha, it's time to choose. Your sister or your money. If you cannot support this family in its time of need, then you are no longer part of this family." I remember the deafening silence that followed, the feeling of the floor dropping out from under me. I chose my future. I chose myself. And true to his word, they cut me out completely. My calls went unanswered. My number was blocked. I was excommunicated. It's a terrifying moment when you realize the love from your own family is conditional. If you've ever been given an ultimatum that felt like it would break you, just type the word choice in the comments below. You are not alone in that battle. The boutique failed anyway, but in their eyes, the villain wasn't Brenda's recklessness. It was my refusal to set myself on fire to keep her warm. The first year after they cut me off was brutal. I'm not going to lie. The silence was a physical presence in my small Atlanta apartment. That first Thanksgiving, I ate a frozen dinner alone, scrolling through social media and watching my family post smiling photos as if I'd never existed. It's a strange kind of grief, mourning people who are still alive. I hit rock bottom during Christmas, surrounded by the city's festive lights, feeling utterly invisible. The best investment I ever made wasn't in the stock market. It was walking into a therapist's office that January. For the first time, a neutral party listened to my entire story and gave me the language for my experience. She explained the toxic dynamic of the scapegoat and the golden child. She validated my decision, framing it not as selfishness, but as a necessary act of survival. That single shift in perspective changed everything. It was like a key turning in a lock I had been trapped behind my whole life. Fueled by this new clarity, I poured all that wounded energy into the one thing they couldn't touch: my career. I became relentless. I worked late, took every certification course offered, and climbed the ladder at my firm. I got a promotion, then another. My salary increased, and I watched my savings account, the very thing that had cost me my family, grow back, stronger than before. I wasn't just saving for a rainy day anymore. I was building a fortress. I decided that if my family wouldn't be my safety net, then I would build one for myself, brick by brick. 3 years ago, after a significant promotion left me with a substantial nest egg, I decided it was time. Time to stop letting my past dictate my geography. I moved back to Savannah, not to the suburban landscape of my childhood, but to the heart of the historic district. I wasn't looking for just a house. I was looking for a home with bones, with a soul. I found it on a quiet, cobblestone lane near Pulaski Square. It was a brick and stucco townhouse built in the 1892nd with a heavy oak door, a wrought iron balcony overflowing with jasmine, and a small, flickering gas lamp by the entrance. The moment I stepped inside onto the original heart pine floors, I felt a sense of profound peace. It had 12-foot ceilings, wavy glass in the tall windows, and a walled-in private courtyard in the back, shaded by a magnificent magnolia tree. This house had weathered over a century of storms, both literal and economic. It felt permanent. It felt safe. The closing day was the proudest moment of my life. As I signed the mountain of paperwork, there was no cosigner, no gift from a parent, no family loan. Every single square foot of that 3,000-square-foot sanctuary was earned by my own labor, my own discipline. Holding those keys in my hand was a feeling of triumph so pure, it brought tears to my eyes. This was my fortress. This was the cornerstone. I spent months restoring it, painting, and filling it with pieces that I loved. It was more than just a house. It was my declaration of independence, made tangible. A house, no matter how beautiful, is just a collection of rooms until you fill it with life. And slowly, cautiously, I began to fill mine. It started with my next-door neighbor, Mr. Abernathy, a retired history professor who had lived in his house for 40 years. He showed me how to care for the ancient rose bushes in my courtyard and shared stories of the neighborhood's past. Then there was the Henderson couple across the street, who brought over a homemade pecan pie and insisted I call them if I ever needed anything. These small acts of unconditional kindness were foreign to me, and they were healing in ways I hadn't expected. Soon, my circle grew. I hosted dinner parties for colleagues, joined a neighborhood preservation society, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I hosted my first ever Thanksgiving, a Friendsgiving, and my dining room was filled with the easy laughter of people who had chosen to be in my life. This was my chosen family, built not on blood and obligation, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. They celebrated my successes, offered a shoulder during tough times, and never once made me feel like their love was something I had to earn. They showed me what true support felt like. It's a beautiful thing when you find your tribe. Think about that person who isn't your blood but has been your family through thick and thin. You don't have to name them, just hold them in your heart as you hit that subscribe button as a quiet thank you to the family we choose. Surrounded by this warmth, in the safety of my sanctuary, I truly believed the war was over and I had found my peace. And just like that, after 2 years of this hard-won peace, the past came calling. Literally. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in August, the air in my courtyard thick with the scent of jasmine. I was watering my gardenias when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some strange instinct made me answer. A voice that was both intimately familiar and completely alien said, "Martha?" It was my mother, Dolores. Her tone was so breezy, so casual, it felt like a punch to the gut. "Sweetie, how have you been?" 5 years. 5 years of absolute, deafening silence. No birthday calls, no holiday cards, not a single text message. And she was asking how I'd been as if we'd spoken last week. Before I could even find my voice, she launched into the reason for her call. "Well, listen, your father and I were thinking it's just been far too long. We'd love to have you over for dinner this Friday. Brenda will be there. We can finally be a family again." A family again. The phrase was a masterclass in manipulation, erasing their ultimatum and the years of abandonment with a single, cheerful sentence. A million alarms went off in my head, but a small, foolish part of me, the little girl who never stopped wanting her parents' approval, flickered with a dangerous hope. Against my better judgment, I heard myself agree. The moment I hung up, a cold dread washed over me. This wasn't an olive branch. This was a summons. I immediately called my therapist. I knew I was walking into an ambush. I just needed to prepare for how big the bombshell was going to be. Friday night, I drove to my childhood home with my therapist's words echoing in my mind. "Maintain your boundaries. You can leave at any time." The house itself looked tired, the lawn overgrown and the paint peeling near the gutters, the first sign that their finances were worse than I imagined. The welcome was just as faded. My parents, Frank and Dolores, gave me stiff, awkward hugs. Then Brenda swept in, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and designer clothes that screamed success, not distress. The contrast was jarring. Dinner was a thinly veiled interrogation about my career, my salary, and finally, my house. They wanted to know the square footage, the neighborhood, the property taxes. Then, over a store-bought dessert, Brenda's performance began. She spoke of a new boutique, a ruthless business partner, and a mountain of unexpected debt. I asked her point blank, "How bad is it?" She looked at my father. Frank cleared his throat, his gaze heavy. "Your sister," he said slowly, "is in about $300,000 of debt." The number sucked the air out of the room. Before I could even react, my mother leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying, desperate hope. "Martha, honey, we know what those historic townhouses are selling for. We need you to sell it." The audacity was stunning. They didn't want a loan. They didn't want a handout. They wanted me to liquidate my sanctuary, my achievement, my fortress, to erase Brenda's colossal failure. It's a chilling feeling when your family stops seeing your success as something to celebrate, but as a resource to be consumed. If you've ever worked hard for everything you have only to have someone feel entitled to it, type "I earned it" in the comments below. In that moment, sitting at that dinner table, I wasn't their daughter. I was their last remaining asset. I said, "Number." 2 simple letters. The calmest, firmest word I could manage. And with that single word, the charade of the loving family reunion evaporated. The room's atmosphere shifted from desperate pleading to venomous rage. "After everything we've done for you?" my mother cried, her tears instantly turning angry. "You ungrateful child." My father seethed, his face turning a dark shade of red. I walked out of that house, leaving the shouting and accusations behind me, but the assault was far from over. It simply changed tactics. The next morning, my phone became a weapon they used against me. It started with a flood of text messages, a relentless cycle of guilt and threats. From my mother, "Your father's stress level is through the roof. I hope you can live with yourself if his heart gives out." From Brenda, "Must be nice in your perfect house while the rest of us suffer because of you." When I blocked their numbers, they began calling from friends' phones. Then came the public shaming. Brenda started posting vague, passive-aggressive statuses on Facebook about family who forget where they came from, and my mother would comment with sad emojis, a performance for their entire social circle. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years began sending me messages, telling me how disappointed they were. It was a coordinated campaign of psychological warfare designed to isolate me and wear me down. The peace I had built in my home was shattered. My sanctuary now felt like a bullseye, and I was the target. Then, after a week of relentless pressure, the texts and calls abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was somehow more menacing than the noise. A few days later, on a quiet Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. It was them. Frank and Dolores stood on my front porch, looking haggard and defeated. My mother's eyes were puffy, and my father's shoulders were slumped. "Martha," he began, his voice low and seemingly filled with regret. "We were out of line. The stress of this situation. It's made us crazy. We said horrible things. Can we please just come in and talk?" Every rational thought in my head screamed no, but seeing them so seemingly broken was a powerful manipulation tactic. Against my better judgment, I let them in. They walked through my home, offering hollow compliments. But I watched them. I saw my mother's eyes linger on the spare key I kept on a hook by the back door. I heard my father ask casual questions about my window locks and whether I had a security system, framing it as fatherly concern. In my home office, he glanced at my filing cabinet. "Smart to keep all your important documents organized," he commented. It was a reconnaissance mission, thinly veiled as an apology. They weren't there to mend bridges, they were there to scout for weaknesses. That feeling in your gut when someone's words are kind but their energy feels predatory, that instinct is almost never wrong. If you've ever had to trust that intuition over a convincing performance, you know how powerful that internal alarm is. That gut feeling is your own personal security system. They left peacefully after I shot down their final, desperate pitch for a home equity loan. Their calmness was the most terrifying part. They weren't defeated. They were done gathering information, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. They were coming back. The moment the door clicked shut behind them, I leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The cloying scent of my mother's perfume still hung in the air. The feeling of being scouted, of being assessed like a mark by my own parents, was a profound violation. But as the adrenaline faded, the fear sharpened into something cold and clear. Resolve. I had spent a lifetime being reactive, responding to Brenda's latest crisis, absorbing my parents' disappointment, stepping aside, making myself smaller. That ended today. They had mistaken my independence for a resource to be plundered, and my kindness for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The very next morning, I was on the phone with the top-rated security firm in Savannah. I took the money I had earned, the very symbol of my success that they so desperately coveted, and I used it to turn my fortress into a trap. By Monday afternoon, my townhouse was equipped with a network of discreet, high-definition, motion-activated cameras, all feeding a live stream to a secure cloud server and my phone. I had one covering the back door, near the spare key. Another, disguised as a photo frame, was in the living room, and the most crucial one was in my home office, a tiny lens hidden in a power adapter, aimed directly at my filing cabinet. As the technician left, a grim calm settled over me. The trap was set. The bait was the life I had built. I was orchestrating the final act of my own, terrible family revenge story. All I had to do now was wait. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was presenting in a quarterly review meeting when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't a text or a call. It was a security notification. Motion detected, living room camera. My blood ran cold. I excused myself, my heart pounding in my ears as I ducked into an empty conference room and opened the live feed on my phone. And there they were. I watched in sickening, high-definition clarity as my mother, Dolores, let Frank and Brenda in through the back door. They were in my house. It wasn't a quiet search. It was a furious, hateful desecration. I watched, helpless, from 20 miles away as Brenda raked my books from their shelves. I saw my father take a letter opener from my desk and methodically slash the cushions of the sofa I'd spent months saving for. But the act that shattered something deep inside me was watching my mother walk to the mantelpiece, pick up the delicate porcelain music box my grandmother had given me, and deliberately drop it to the floor. Then, as a final act of theatrical cruelty, Brenda pulled a tube of crimson lipstick from her designer handbag and scrawled one word in huge, jagged letters across my freshly painted wall. Ungrateful. There is a unique kind of horror that comes from watching the people who gave you life try to destroy the life you've built. If this moment makes your blood run cold, if you believe that some betrayals cut too deep to ever heal, hit that like button. Let the algorithm know that stories of survival matter. While they were busy destroying my past, I was on the phone with 911, calmly dictating their future. "Yes, operator," I said, my voice steady as I watched them on my screen. A breaking and entering in progress. 3 suspects, and I have it all on video. I arrived home at the same time as the first patrol car, its blue and red lights flashing silently across the quiet, historic street. I walked up my own garden path, phone clutched in my hand, and met the 2 officers at my broken back door. The scene inside was exactly as I'd seen on the video feed, but the reality of it, the smell of my mother's perfume mixed with the dust of shattered plaster, was a physical blow. My family immediately launched into their performance. "Oh, thank God you're here, officer," Dolores cried, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Our daughter, she's having a breakdown. She invited us over and then just started smashing her own things." Frank stood beside her, the picture of a concerned patriarch. "It's just a family misunderstanding," he said gravely. "She's always been dramatic." They were so confident, so practiced in their roles, so certain their status as my parents made them untouchable. The lead officer, a man with weary eyes who had clearly seen it all, turned to me. "Ma'am, what's your version?" I took a steadying breath. "My version," I said, my voice cutting through their lies, "is that these 3 people have been harassing me for $300,000. And when I refused, they broke into my house to destroy it." They all erupted in denial. I didn't raise my voice. I simply raised my phone. "Officer," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Their version is interesting, but I have the director's cut." I hit play. The tiny screen illuminated the room, and we all watched in silence. The illegal entry, the slashing of the sofa, the deliberate shattering of my grandmother's music box, and Brenda, with a smug flourish, writing on my wall. I watched the color drain from my father's face. The trap hadn't just caught them, it had exposed them in their own undeniable, high-definition ugliness. There's no real joy in watching your own parents be escorted to a police car. There is only the profound, hollow finality of it all. As they were led away, my neighbors watched silently from their porches, witnessing the public dismantling of the perfect family image my parents had spent a lifetime curating. The video evidence was airtight. The legal process was swift. A judge granted me a 5-year restraining order without hesitation. They all faced felony charges for breaking and entering and destruction of property. But here's the truly ironic twist: the secret my house had been holding. My lawyer confirmed that my townhouse's historic designation, the very thing that gave it its character, came with ironclad legal protections. It couldn't be sold or altered without a mountain of approvals from the Savannah Historic Preservation Board. The quick, easy cash they had fantasized about was never even a possibility. Their entire violent, hateful plan was built on a foundation of greed and profound ignorance. For them, the worst sentence wasn't the probation or the court-ordered therapy. It was the public humiliation. A neighbor's cell phone video of their arrest made its way onto the local community Facebook page, and the story of the prominent family who brutalized their daughter for her house spread like wildfire. For people who cared more about appearances than anything else, their reputation was ruined. The legal battle was over, but the emotional one was just beginning. That next weekend, my chosen family showed up with paint, plaster, and pizzas. Standing in my living room, surrounded by friends who were helping me literally rebuild my life, I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about what it truly means to be safe. It's been over a year now since the night the lights and sirens filled my street. The house is whole again, more beautiful than before. The wall that once bore that hateful word is now a deep, tranquil blue, and it holds a large, vibrant painting given to me by my chosen family. My new security system is a quiet hum in the background, a reminder not of fear, but of the peace I fought to protect. I learned through a distant relative that my parents had to sell my childhood home and downsize to a small apartment across town. Brenda, stripped of her enablers, is working a regular 9-to-5 job for the first time in her life and is in court-mandated financial counseling. Their downfall wasn't my revenge. It was the natural gravity of their own choices. Justice, I found, is often just the bill for a lifetime of bad decisions finally coming due. A few months ago, a letter arrived from my lawyer. It was from Brenda. It was a real apology, devoid of the usual manipulation, just words of regret and an acknowledgement of the damage she'd caused. I read it, and I realized forgiveness isn't a grand event where you welcome someone back into your life. For me, it was a quiet, personal release. It was letting go of the anger and, more importantly, letting go of the hope that they would ever become the family I needed them to be. My revenge was not the break-in or the arrest. My revenge is the peaceful life I live today. It is the laughter in my home, the thriving garden in my courtyard, and the calm I feel when I lock my door at night. If you believe that your peace is worth protecting and that your story of survival deserves to be heard, this is your community. Subscribe to join a family of voices who understand that true strength isn't just weathering the storm, but in finally building a sanctuary that no storm can ever tear down. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by who shows up with paint and pizza when your world has been broken, and who reminds you that you have the strength to rebuild it, better and stronger than before.